Hi, everyone. It is my pleasure to welcome you to this Wheaton conversation with Amber Cowan and Mary Cheek Mills. I'm Pamela Weichman, your host and the Director of Education and Artist Services at WheatonArts. I'm a white female in my 30s with long brown hair and blue eyes, and I'm wearing a pink sweater. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I am broadcasting from southern New Jersey, which I recognize as traditionally the land of the Lenni Lenape. Wheaton Conversations is presented by PNC Arts Alive, the United Nations International Year of Glass, and the Art Alliance for Contemporary Glass. We thank them for their support. Through membership, donations, and shopping at shop.wheatonarts.org, you too can show your support. Please consider these options so we can continue to offer free programs such as this. It is my pleasure to introduce my co-host for this program, Mary Cheek Mills. Mary is the Director of Exhibitions and Collections at WheatonArts and is curator of the current Museum of American Glass exhibition, Amber Cowan, Alchemy of Adornment. She is also the Historic Glass Specialist for AECOM Cultural Resources, where she assists archaeologists in identifying and interpreting glass artifacts recovered in Philadelphia. In conjunction with this project, she curated the 2016 WheatonArts exhibition, From the Ground Up, Archaeology, Artisans, Everyday Life, which some of you may recall seeing in our Museum of American Glass. Mary, thank you for joining us and for leading our conversation today.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to introduce Amber Cowan, our guest tonight. Amber's sculptural glasswork is based around the use of recycled, upcycled, and second life American pressed glass and industrial scrap. She uses the processes of flame working, hot sculpting, and glass blowing to create sculptures that overwhelm the viewer with ornate abstraction and viral accrual. Her work incorporates collected antique glass elements that are used to activate and animate the material into a visual story of historic objects through a contemporary lens. Amber lives and works in Philadelphia, where she received her MFA in glass from Tyler School of Art and Architecture of Temple University. She's been a faculty member of the Tyler Glass Department since 2011. Amber was awarded the 2023 Delphi Award from the Smithsonian Women's Committee, a 2021 United States Artist Fellowship in Crafts, and the 2014 Rekow Commission from the Corning Museum of Glass. Her September 2023 show at the Heller Gallery was reviewed by the New York Times. It's a fabulous review, I must say. Her work can be found in the permanent collections of over a dozen museums around the world, including the Museum of Art and Design in New York, the Museum of Fine Arts, Houston, and the Shanghai Museum of Glass.
Hi, everyone. Thank you all for coming.
So I'm going to share my screen now, and in the exhibit that Amber and I did together at Wheaton Arts, we began it with a video really that shows how Amber does her work and also how the pressed glass is incorporated into her pieces. So give me just a moment. So the name of the show is Alchemy of Adornment. I think this video sort of is a really good introduction to Amber's work. I hope you enjoy it. I will tell you that it's silent at first, but then the music comes in. So don't be surprised if you don't have sound initially. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. When I first started at WheatonArts not too long ago, it was a little over a year ago, the first thing that I knew I'd be doing was an exhibit with Amber. And I'll let her tell you a little bit about that experience. For me, it's been fantastic. And I think Amber really enjoyed sort of mining the museum.
Yeah, Wheaton has one of the biggest collections of this pressed glass, which really is what my work is about. And so when Mary and I first started talking about the exhibition, we basically just went through, the two of us together, the whole museum, as well as the storage rooms, the back rooms. And it was like, I was like a kid in a candy shop. Actually, we kind of both were, in that I get really excited about, a lot of these pieces. And so we were basically just writing down which ones that I thought would essentially match the work that I was making. And then also like a back and forth between what I saw there and what I was working on, what elements I could pull from the visual kind of textures that I was seeing at in the pieces at the museum. And then stuff, that I've really already used in my work before. So such as the goddess vase on the left there. I've been using that piece in my work, or versions of that piece in my work, for quite a while now. The centerpiece, which is my absolute favorite piece at the museum, it's this Burmese Mount Washington vase. I just think that this piece, it just looks like a piece of marzipan. It's just so edible. And I really love that, the flower detail on that, which is something that, this particular type of flower is something that actually you just saw, how I make those. But it has become a pattern element in my work for quite a while now. And then also Wheaton has this little lighted display case of these baskets in one of the rooms. And ever since I've been going to the museum, I always really loved this texture of the thorny vines, which is an element that I also make. And actually you saw me make in the video. I make a lot of these textures and these vines in my work, and have been doing for years. So these are some of the pieces that I'm referencing. So the green piece is a piece. I believe this is from 2018. But this was that goddess vase in there, and then the piece on the right is, you can see some of those elements of that kind of rondelle flower, daisy flower that I make. And I almost use it as like a it's almost like a wallpaper in my work, or has become that. It's kind of like this background texture. But you can see that color is very similar to that piece at the museum as well.
So this is the entrance to Amber's show at the Museum of American Glass. And it was really fun because her pieces are so unique and the colors are so strong and vibrant. And this particular gallery has little windows. So we were able to create little vignettes as we went. And on the right, you see Amber talking about one of her pieces. This is the largest piece that was in the show. Um, and we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail. So the title is Echo to the Bridesmaid. I know not what has happened to your pod. So when I first saw this, I wasn't sure really what was going on. And I talked to Amber a lot. And what she's really doing is referencing a 1990s video game, Echo the Dolphin. And she invites the viewer to really contemplate what the bridesmaid's very puzzling situation. In the game, Echo, the dolphin, bravely travels through time and space, excuse me, to save his pod, which is his people, his fellow dolphins. And he's trying to save the dolphins and the planet. And in Amber's work, the bridesmaid is peered into the reflecting ball that you see there behind her. And she peers into this gazing ball, and she can see the future. But what is so sad is that there aren't any people in the future. Really, the people are gone and nature has taken over. So we've got a couple of detail shots, and I'll let Amber talk about these.
Yeah, this piece this piece was actually one of the only pieces that was I had previously made. It wasn't that old, but I had made this for a show that I had at Heller Gallery called Gathering the Sky, Mining the Milk. And this particular color at the factory, this color was called Sky, or the majority of the color was called Sky, which also references the title of the show. The bridesmaid stall is this recurring character in my work. You saw her in that previous pink piece. She has almost become like this, almost like a self-portraiture in this way. That she kind of goes on all these different adventures. But in this piece, yeah, I was actually working on this piece with this woman communing with these dolphins and looking into the future. Can you go to the next slide, Mary?
Sure.
And as I was working on this, because this one, like Mary said, is a very large piece. It was a beast to make. But I was working on it for a while, and friends were coming over and saying, man, this really looks like Echo the Dolphin. And so I started really getting into that video game and realizing how it's like this dolphin just looking for his pod. And it was really referencing my work as well. So I was thinking about like looking into the future visions, things like that. So I created the candle, or the column, Doric column on the left hand side of the piece is actually an old candlesticks from the Cambridge glass factory, I believe from the late 1920s. And I created this like garden mirror ball looking globe to go on top of that, which is like I mirrorized a blue blown glass orb that I made. And then also the lion, when you go up to the piece, is kind of like looking you right in the eye, kind of in a sense, like questioning the viewer, and like, you know, the bridesmaid's talking to this dolphin, but the lion's kind of talking to you in this sense. And then on the other column on the right hand side is this like wise owl kind of overseeing the whole thing. So yeah, this piece is, I'm still like, I don't know. I had a philosophy professor in grad school that said that the artist shouldn't make their work and write about it or talk about it at the same time. And I think that that's definitely a luxury to not to have that option. But I also think that this piece has things have come out of it as I've looked at it more, and like, you know, thought about what it really means. But one other element in this is that right next to the blue dolphin on the right is this iridescent disc. And that was, I don't think that you can really see it in this photo, but I have glass now gifted to me from all over the country, sometimes the world now. When people find out about my work, they want to just donate stuff to me or ask me if I want old broken stuff. It's really a pretty cool aspect of my work that has come into being in the last few years. And that piece was actually gifted to me by a Tiffany dealer, and it was the broken base of a goblet foot, and it has an original Lewis Comfort Tiffany signature on that foot. So it's a really special piece, and I knew that I wanted to use it in a really cool way. So, and then also the bridesmaids kind of walking up onto this beaded shore, and there's pieces of Tiffany glass kind of lining the shore of the beach there as well. We can go on to the next one. Yeah, so one of the next displays in the show is a display of the cullet that I use. And Mary and Fallon did a really good job of organizing the cullet in there. But this is kind of how my raw material looks when I find it. This pile is really now gone, but most of my material comes from a cullet yard in West Virginia. And that cullet yard was supplied by mainly by the Fenton Glass Factory and Boyd's Glass, which was in Cambridge, Ohio, and a couple other factories. This cullet yard was around since the 70s. It was essentially forgotten for a while. And all of the material now, the factories have shut down. So all the material that I use is essentially dead stock glass. Colors aren't being produced anymore. And I basically travel to this, it's a scrapyard, it's not a glamorous place. But I essentially travel to this scrapyard a couple times a year and sort through these barrels and dirty warehouse to collect the material that I use. So Mary and Fallon, I washed all this color, which it was kind of, if you haven't been to the show, this is this massive mound of color. And with all the shows I've had, I've never had this kind of mountain of material before. And I really love it because that's kind of how a part of my studio looks. And what I look at every day is just this like kind of, this is what my raw material looks like before I flame work with it. So I really love this kind of like display just of raw material.
We really wanted the visitors at the museum to get a better idea of what cullet is, because the average person isn't going to understand, well, it's leftover glass or it's chunks of glass. but they look into this little window and you can see there's a dog there, there's a cat head, all these bits and pieces that are your factory rejects. And I think Amber was really lucky to be able to get colored like this, but sort of what her work does really is tell a story about the history of American glass. Because in 1902, there were more than 100 glass factories producing pressed glass in these beautiful opaque colors. And most of these factories were in Western Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Ohio. And these opaque colors were made to really go with the interior design of the period. And that's something that we talk about through the exhibit. But pressed glass was much more affordable than blown glass. So it gave the average housewife, and forgive me if that sounds sexist, but that's really the way it was, that the housewife often was going out and doing the shopping, or if she collected something for her home, yes, someone else may go out and buy it for her, but it was a way of bringing a little bit of elegance and style, even if it's just in the color, into your home, because this was affordable. But by the end of the 20th century, all of these factories had closed. The colors went out of fashion. These novelties, blue roosters and blue dogs weren't what people were buying. The studio glass movement had come in, and imported glass was less expensive than American made. A lot of things changed and gradually these factories closed. And to the best of our knowledge, and I've talked to other experts about this, as far as we know, there is only one factory left in that region that still produces what I would call hand-pressed glass. Which, in other words, it's made exactly like you saw it in that video, where someone is carrying a ladle of glass to the mold and operating the press. So that's the Mosser family, the Mosser Glass Company, which is a family-owned business in Cambridge, Ohio. And you'll see there are a few other pieces in Amber's show that were made at Mosser. But it's really, it says a lot about the decline of the American glass factory and the change in how American glass is made and what people buy. So this was a big part of the story in the exhibit. So this is an example of where we put a couple of museum pieces, the pieces there basically on the left of your screen, in with one of Amber's pieces. And this is a beautiful chocolate color. And it varies between sort of a light caramel to a darker brown. But this color was first made in 1900 by the Indiana Tumbler and Goblet Company. And that particular company made the two press pieces that you see there on the left. And during this time period, there were two important architectural movements going on, you might say. The arts and crafts bungalow, or the huge Victorian mansions. I say mansion, but think of it more as a two-story or two or three-story home. But they both had very rich wood elements in the interior architecture. They weren't painting the wood. They were really focusing on nature and these dark, rich colors. So the glass went with it beautifully. And I want Amber to talk about the detail of this piece. It's really special.
Thanks. Yeah, this color chocolate is really one of my favorite colors to work with. Not only technically, there are some definite like technical challenges that I have to overcome with working with the material. A lot of it's really dirty. There's sometimes like furnace elements in it. There's some of it's just really hard color to work with, but this particular color chocolate is like the smoothest, softest, most beautiful color to work with. And it has just such an array of, hues to it, depending upon how the flame hits it. And I can't control that too much, but I just love the richness of this color. And also the fact that it speaks to a history, because really you just don't see this color that much anymore in contemporary glass. It's not a popular color in that. And also they made a lot of really interesting little, I say trinkets, but they made a lot of really cool characters in this color. And part of my work is finding and mining the history of the material to really search for the characters, the animals, the little figurines. There's a little basket in there that I made the wheat for, the little cart. Not all the colors that I use have a lot of really cool historic pieces that were made in that color. And this color happens to have a lot of that. I do a lot of research of what was originally made in the colors, and I get really excited when I find something cool like that I can use, like a little cart or a basket or a miniature hen. Stuff that's really going to start to tell a story, and build more of a visual narrative with the material. So this character, Melanie, actually, Mary found out the story that the Melanie character she was made in the 80s, right, Mary?
Right.
In the
1980
80s.
to 82. Yeah.
80 to 82. So she's the same age as me. But they had a contest by the factory to name her, and Melanie was the name that was the winner. So in this piece, Melanie's taking her snail out foraging for mushrooms, and she's having a wonderful little walk, and she comes across a little hen and a horse eating a basket full of wheat, and she's traveling along her path. The snail is a piece that I use a lot in my work. It's a recurring character as well. I like to have these recurring pieces in my work that kind of can move through different stories and different narrations of them. So, and then also the pieces that we picked out to display with my piece, the historic pieces. Will you go back to that for a sec, Mary?
Sure.
That the kind of dolphin fish piece, that fish was one that I had used before. I have a piece that's at the Toledo Museum of Art that uses that same fish. And so when I saw it at the museum, I knew that I wanted to display it along with my sculpture. So it was really fun to be able to kind of select and choose different historic pieces that I could combine with my work and the story. And this is another piece that this isn't in the show, but this is another piece that I made based on that color as well.
I'll let you start with this one. I know it's one of your favorites.
Yeah. So this piece is called Art Nude and Argonaut. And the great thing about this piece is that if you remember seeing in the video that Wheaton actually owns the press mold of this vase, which is a pretty popular vase in terms of pressed glass collecting. And I just really love her as a sculpture and as a focal point in the piece. The story of this piece was that this particular vase was made by the McKee Glass Company in 1931, and apparently there was some outrage about her being nude, and So, which is ridiculous, but McKee came out with another version of the piece, which, do you have that image next, Mary? Which is a dressed version of the vase, which I think is the nude version is actually just so much better. It's just so funny how they edited their controversial vase. And it's also funny because when I was finishing this piece in March, there was all that controversy going around about Michelangelo's David being too controversial to show to the high school class because it was nude. And I'm like, oh Lord, we're here again. You know, this has been going on for so long. But anyway, maybe will you go back to the piece again, Mary?
Sure.
So, but yeah, so this also features on the bottom there, this like serpent dish, which is called the Argonaut dish, which is kind of a also a relatively famous press glass piece in terms of famous press glass pieces, but it has all these shells surrounding it and these really beautiful serpentine legs on the vase. So we go to the two down. Yeah, so this is the original mold, which is just, the mold itself is just such a beautiful object. They're so heavy. It's made of iron. And I have to say, we did attempt to pull a bunch of these molds in the studio. I had a day where I got to use the studio at Wheaton and use a couple of the molds, which you saw in the video. And I have to say, like, I actually have my own side lever press at Tyler where I work, but I don't use molds this big too often. And every time I use a larger mold, I am just in awe of the factory workers that did this all day long. It is really difficult to get it right. You know, even a little underfill or a little overfill of the mold, and it just doesn't come out right. It's amazing how skilled of workers they really were at these factories. And, you know, like Mary said, there's really only one factory still doing this. And a lot of these molds were lost. I saved a bunch of the molds when Fenton was going out of business. But there's still a lot of molds that really, you know, who knows where they went. And I'm just really happy that Wheaton has this mold. So
This was originally a McKee glass mold, and these molds were also they're not only heavy, they were very difficult to make and expensive to make. So when one company would close, another company would buy them. So the Kemple company, Kemple Glassworks, purchased some of the McKee molds, and then later they gave the molds ended up at Wheaton. I started to say they gave them; they weren't given. But we still have a lot of molds, and when we can get a mold that's working properly, it's great that we can have artists come in and use them. And actually, one project that we're working on right now in the museum is trying to catalog the molds, because we have old wooden molds that were really just made from a part of a log, to ones that are very complex like this. This is a great Art Deco piece. And one thing that I found really interesting when we were researching this, they were originally sold to florists in 1931. So I think it'd be great to have someone deliver your flowers in a vase like this. It's pretty incredible.
this is another piece I put in just to kind of continue that a little bit of the story vein from the last one. This piece is not in the current show. It's a piece that I had in a show at the Brunier Art Museum in Iowa, and they currently own this piece. But I really love this piece, and I didn't get to talk about it or have it on view for too long. But this piece is called The Dreams of a Descendant of Cyrnus. And I was kind of thinking with this piece, I became completely fascinated with the large bowl on the right, which I've looked at a lot of press glass, and I believe this piece to be one of the most difficult to produce pieces of press glass that was ever made. It's a really large compote with lots of undercuts. The female figurine in it is really detailed. There's holes behind her legs, her foot and her hands are perfectly shaped. And there's also a blown foot at the bottom, which they would have had to do after. But when I became fascinated with this piece, and then started really doing research on it. And what I found was this piece was produced by the Cambridge Glass Factory as well. And the story I found out was that during the time when this piece was starting to be released, a lot of the people in the factory or in the town of Cambridge, Ohio, worked in this factory. This was around 1936 to 1937. And apparently there was a circus that came to town for an entire month. And all of the people in the town were fascinated by this German trapeze artist. And so they nicknamed this bowl that they were making the Flying Lady Vase. And so in the collector circles, this is known as the Flying Lady Vase. But apparently the factory workers, a lot of them had this in their homes, and they said that when the priest or in-laws would come over or whatever, they would hide it in the basement, because at the time she was a little risque for, to have out in the house. But we go back to the last one, Mary. But this piece, I was kind of thinking about the story of the sirens, and the pieces on the left were original candlesticks made in that same line. And I was thinking about them as these sirens standing on their rocky shore, and instead of calling the sailors to their death on the rocky coast, they were calling back home one of their lost at sea other sirens. So that was kind of the story. And there's like this call and response, which I guess is actually call and response like in the dolphin piece as well. So like thinking about the back and forth between movement and sound of the piece. So I guess you can go the next one, Mary.
So these pieces were made by the Jeanette Glass Company in a color called shell pink, which is very similar to the one that you were just seeing. And it was only made from 1958 to 1959. But the color, these very pale pinks are really significant because it was such a change after World War II when the colors were really drab. Lots of browns, dark navies, just not, if you think of the colors of uniforms, that's what people were seeing. So after World War II, and people began to have a little more money, they could take vacations. So the pink is referencing shrimp, the interior of shells, flamingos, all these things that really allude to pleasure. And some of the companies gave these lines very sort of elaborate names that refer to Italy, where here in America, most of the people definitely could not afford to go to Italy. It would have just been something that was very exotic that they might see in a magazine or on television. But for example, the piece in the center is part of the Lombardy line. So after World War II, if you think about these pinks and the popular culture of the time, you could actually buy a stove in pink. It's the time of the pink poodle skirts, the pink Cadillac. So pink was the theme of interior design, really, one of the main colors. for the late 1940s and 1950s. And with this, it's sort of funny because these pieces were advertised as a color that could go with any color of flower. So ideally, if you think about the vases, the compotes, it was a way to entice women to use these pieces for their own creativity at home.
I want a pink stove. um yeah, I love this color so much. I in my head it's marshmallow pink. But the candelabra and the cornucopia, really a lot of times now with my work, I'm looking to activate the material. So in these pieces, the candles are dripping, the work's dripping and moving. And in almost all my work now, I'm looking for elements that are going to activate the sculpture to make it look like when you turn away, it's still going to be moving. The glass is fluid. There's things fluttering in it, swimming in it, crawling across it. And that's kind of the feeling as of late that I want my work to look like, that it's that the material is alive, essentially.
So as we go from the 50s to the 1960s, and up to 1970, it's peace, love, and rock and roll, and the colors really changed. You get these very vibrant, sunshiny colors. This color is called Bittersweet. It's by L.E. Smith. And I know that Amber will talk to you a little bit more about it. But also, if you look at the sugar bowl or covered compote in the center of the main piece, it's a nod to this modern color, but is not as overwhelming as the pieces on the left from our collection. And I really think it was a way for the housewife who wanted orange, but they weren't quite ready to go that far. It just has the very delicate little orange flowers. And actually the press pattern, that shape, is very old, goes back to the 19th century. So, and I will say that this piece is much more vibrant, I think, than the photograph shows.
It's true. Yeah, this color, this L.E. Smith bittersweet orange, is a very popular line in the mid-century modern collectors circles. Once you go down the rabbit hole of the mid-century modern collectors, it's a whole other world. So yeah, these kind of handkerchief vases are really nowadays are really sought after. So this is kind of like a nod to that aesthetic, as well as like the patterning of this kind of era.
So when Amber and I were talking about the different pieces and what to put in for the show, really, how do we want to fill these little niches in that gallery? She told me she'd had sort of this idea about making a piece that takes advantage of these two-colored little animals. These are little animal dishes where part of the body is blue and part of the body is white, and just using this swath of color through the center. And I really encouraged her to go for it, because it has a lamb on one side and a dog on the other. And people who visit the museum really love these.
Yeah, I kept finding all these, in my collecting. I'm always collecting, and I kept finding all these animals with these white heads and blue bodies, or vice versa. And I just thought they were so funny. And there's just really good animals. Like that duck is so amazing. And what Mary told me was that they actually sold them as mustard containers. So you could buy a mustard in that, and then when you were done with the mustard, you just cleaned it out and, you know, just displayed it in your house. So the cat and the hen on the right-hand side would have had bases to them too. I love how the duck has the base that kind of looks like a little lake or like a little pond below it. But yeah, I had this idea to make this piece kind of just showing off this weird swath of color between these animals.
And one thing that's interesting historically, because I think today we think, all right, do you really want your food to be served in a duck or a cat or whatever?
Yes.
But that goes back in ceramics. They've been doing that for hundreds of years, but it was very difficult to do in glass because of the glass material itself. So there was a new recipe developed in around 1865 that really enabled this very fine pressing. It was non-lead, uh, and that particular type of glass and the pressing technology went together really well. So this was a period in time around 1870 when these first became popular.
This is just another piece that it's this one's actually not in the show either, but I was, you know, a lot of people ask me about my monochromatic color scheme, and I do like that, you know, but I'm starting to kind of branch out a little bit, and this is another piece that I've recently made with the blue and white theme that I really like, called Fountain with Butterflies and Periwinkle and Milk. And it's kind of this dripping blue periwinkle fountain, and there's these little Westmoreland glass butterflies kind of fluttering all over the fountain. We can go to the next one.
So this is the last piece we'll be looking at today. And actually, it's one of my favorites. And we mentioned to you before the Mosser Company, and the Mosser that it's still in actually functioning, still making pressed glass. And they made the little small covered cake plate that you see there in the center. I'm going to go to a detail of this so you can really see what's happening. So Amber, do you want to talk about the story here?
I like your version of this. And then I'll say something after.
Well, actually, I was in Amber's studio when she was working on this, and I said, you know, talk to me about it. And she said, well, you know, the covered cake plate is new, and it's sort of like you're playing. And actually, it is. If you imagine a child with their mother's cake plate, and so the child's created this little intimate environment up on the top with Willie the Mouse and his tractor, and the tractor's going through the grass. And then down underneath, the train is sort of undulating up and over the hills. Um, I think it really shows how Amber captures a child's imagination. This is really one of my favorite pieces. And it's just because you can sit there and think about your own memories. It's this wonderful, nostalgic sort of aspect of Amber's work. And if you look over on the right, this is the glass that was used in this. It's called a Boyd Special because it's made by the Boyd's Glass Company, and you can still find these toy trains online. They made these in 100 different colors. I did some research into it, and you could even get a Christmas train. I think they had an Easter train as well. Some of them were opaque, some were transparent and hand painted, but they are available. You can get your very own. And one thing, some people will sort of look at this, and in our day of plastic, they think, why do you have a glass toy? But in early American glass, there were a lot of glass toys. They were some of the first pieces made with a pressing technology, and they're also small blown pieces, and they're made either their size either for children or for dolls, or very tiny to go into a dollhouse. So this was definitely not something new. It's just our own mentality of being afraid to give a child glass. So
Yeah,
anyway,
this
a lot of fun.
Thanks, Mary. The Boyd's company made some of the coolest little tchotchke items. I'm finding, and they had the best colors. They really, this company really focused on just tiny things, and I'm starting to like really mine their catalog lately. Like I just went and grabbed these, like, look at this car that I've recently, these cars that I recently found are just so good. And I had been saving that train set for quite a while, to use in a piece. I knew for a while that I wanted this train set kind of like chugging through one of my pieces. Um, and then the little mouse, this, they named him Willie the Mouse, and he has shown up on in a couple other my pieces before, but he's kind of like watching over his field with his tractor, trains chugging through. And like Mary said, it really is like focusing on like all these like toys, that were kind of made in this material. And I see a question here, which is, am I concerned about the colors? And I would say, Fred, is that, for example, this pink of the Boyd's glass pink, I had one barrel of it that I got probably like maybe 8 years ago, and now I have about a box this big left. So that's one of the colors that, it's just part of my work where it's like it, some colors, yeah, I have a lot more of than others. And it's sad, but it's like it's just kind of part of my process, in that like I I work through some colors, I save little bits of them that maybe I can use it in one piece in the future. But that's why this material is special, because it's not being made anymore. But I also think that, innovation in an artistic practice comes with when you have a need. So I think that I'm always figuring out new ways of getting material, finding material, working with what I have. But yeah, it is sad that I only have a little bit of this color left. And some color, like for example, I love the color yellow, but they just really didn't make that much of it. And so I can't really make a really big yellow piece. So, there's just some boundaries with the way I work. And I just try to navigate that a little bit.
So
Yeah.
Amber, thank you so much for being here with us. And does anyone have a question before I stop sharing my screen? If you have any questions where I need to go back to something, I can.
Oh, she
Otherwise,
wants to see the shelves. Yeah, so this is kind of like what my shelves look like. I sit here because people like to see this, but it's a little chaotic right now, but I try to like keep everything a little bit organized. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on. That's my Cambridge area up there. You can see that. So a lot of, sometimes stuff is on the shelf for a long time and then I decide to use it. Or sometimes, I'm really searching for a very specific thing that I use right away. Yeah, so it's a combination of like what I have on my mind, what I'm searching for, what people give me. I got a major donation of glass this summer from a family whose mother passed away, and she was a collector of particularly blue milk glass. I drove up to Vermont to get hundreds of pieces from her. Yeah, so it's kind of like what comes my way, really, too. What is the average weight? They vary, I guess. The large, they go from like that large diptych is I try not to make stuff that I can't move myself anymore. I've done that in the past, and I work in my studio pretty much alone all day. So it's hard to make stuff that I can't lift by myself. So I would say nowadays my work is so that I can lift it by myself. Um, what other questions? How long does it take to make a big piece? I'm usually working on a couple things at once. So I'm not sure exactly how long it would take for me to make like one from start to finish, but my larger, the large sculptures take a few months to make. Generally a few months, maybe up to six months to make. So do the vintage pieces inspire the greater vision? I would say it's a back and forth between stuff I find and searching for stuff. So, I start with a color like this rosaline pink I use a lot. So then I start searching for stuff that was made in that color. And if something inspires me, a pattern, a character, something like that, then I'll build a piece around that if I really like that object. Or sometimes, like, for example, I found this black car, and how cool is that? So now I want to make a piece with this black car, So I think that it's a back and forth between what I find, what I search for, what people donate to me or give me. I get a text almost once a week saying, "Hey, Amber, do you want this thing?" I have a lot now in my collection. So now I'm really searching for unique stuff, characters, things like that. So I would say I get a lot of questions about how I put stuff together. And I would say essentially it's like flower arranging. I make a lot of components. Mostly my whole day is making components. And then I'm collaging and building building a collage of these elements. Holy Grail color. Oh man, Holy Grail color. Yeah, there is this teal color that I really, really love. I think it was a Westmoreland glass teal. And also Fenton made this it was called like Ocean Mist or something that I would love to get my hands on, but I just can't find any in like cullet or raw form. Also yellows. Like I said, I just really love yellows, and I just don't have a lot of that. Someone told me about this German lamp worker that had passed away and was giving up all of his glass was being sold. So I went and drove out to this guy's place and bought a bunch of his old German lamp working rods. So I got some yellow and some different colors that way. So yeah, did I answer? I think I maybe answered a lot of the questions.
There's one about collaborating. Someone asked, have you ever thought about collaborating with other glass artists on a piece?
I do collaborate sometimes. I work with my friend Nate Purcell a lot. And I've worked with a couple. Yeah. I mean, for the most part, I'm kind of do my own thing. I'm just in my own world in here. I'm not gonna lie. I like just like doing my own thing at my own pace. But I do occasionally work with friends. There's a really big glass community in Philadelphia. And I like to be a part of that. So yeah. How did I gain my love of working in press glass? I would say that it kind of fell upon me in that in grad school, I really just found a barrel of this glass and started to work with it. And it was this color of pink. And it kind of just put me on this path of working with this material. And I would not say that I'm an expert like Mary, but I'm a minor expert now at patterns and colors and things like that. Of now when I see a piece in a thrift store or something like that, I can a lot of times know what factory it was from, what time period it was from, things like that. So I would say like I never really had a big interest like that glass. It kind of went out of fashion in a sense. And then I found this material, I found this cullet, and it started this journey for me of learning about history and glass history and the history of really the factories in this country. You know, the US was pretty rare in the amount of glass factories that were producing this kind of stuff. You know, entire towns were made up of people that worked at these factories. So I don't know, I just started this kind of, it was this whole avenue of glass that I had never like really thought of before. There's a lot of this stuff in museums, and I think it's a lot of times it's overlooked. But it is a part of history and glass history that I think is really pretty unique. So anything else? If you would like to message me personally, I will discuss my exact process, but I don't really love discussing like exactly how I make exactly all my secrets, but I would love to discuss with you personally if you write me an email or message me on Instagram, something like that. Okay. But I would say it's mostly put together, think of flower arranging, think of it's cold fused, most of it. I don't hot fuse there. I'm not saying I don't, but I don't hot fuse most of my work. And that's so that if one little piece does break, I can take it out, re-put it in, things like that. I think of my work as, you know, most sculptors use all kinds of materials, and I do too. And I don't have shame in that, you know, so.
And Amber, you spoke to this a little bit, but someone is asking, why do you keep the factory terminology in the titles?
Oh, yeah, I like to do that. Because I think that it adds this element of the story that, you know, if someone wants to look at my work and just think they like the color or is pretty, that's fine with me. But I think that now a lot of times people are searching for the history of it. They want to know what factory it was from, what time period, things like that. So that's the kind of stuff that keeps me interested in the work. And I think, you know, as artists, that we have to keep ourselves inspired somehow, and like finding out these stories. Like Mary found out a lot of stuff that I didn't know about the material that I was even working with. And I think that stuff is really interesting. And I like to try to convey that as much as possible to my viewers or collectors or people just interested in my work. I think that it builds a level, you know, builds up that history a little bit. So if anyone ever has any more questions, feel free to message me, anything like that.
Thank you so much. This was so fantastic. And Mary, thank you for leading the conversation today.
Happy to be here.
Thanks, Mary. Thanks, Pam.
You're welcome. If anybody would
Amber.
like to learn more about Amber, please follow her on there's her handle where you can follow her on social media, as well as Mary's.
Okay, thank you, everyone.
You're welcome. Wheaton Conversations will continue. In December, we have another one scheduled for Thursday, December 14th. Please be sure to register on our website. The conversation will be with Maxwell Kofi Doncourt, and he'll be discussing West African drums and drumming. As always, I thank you for joining. If you would like to, please download the chat or reach out to me. My email is on the screen, and I can provide you with a text. I'd also love to hear from those that are new to the series or to WheatonArts. Please feel free to contact me with any questions or comments that you may have. I sincerely thank you for joining us, and please join us for future programs. Thanks, everybody.